Hello, and welcome to the Be Ready podcast. We are your go-to group of moms and educators who provide reliable and easily accessible information about education and child development. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. We are really excited to talk about gun safety, and we have a guest with us, Laura Buck. Laura, you want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Laura Buck, and I'm a member of Moms Demand Action. And with our Central Florida group, I'm specifically the lead for the Be Smart program. I got involved with Moms Demand Action back in 2019. Was just a member, kind of finding out what it's about, and then got more involved with Moms Demand Action in my local group a couple years ago. When I was actually at school volunteering for my kids, and I happened to be there when they went through a lockdown drill. And so that was my first experience, very eye-opening, being in a lockdown drill for school. And so being there with my kids in the classroom. During that time, thoughts run through your head. And of course, one of the thoughts was that this is unacceptable. So I kind of bumped up my game and my involvement with moms, and through school board meetings, protests, advocacy day, and tabling, I've slowly gotten very involved in our community in ways that we can change our legislation. And also through the Be Smart program, educate parents and gun owners about secure storage. There's many aspects that Moms Demand Action tries to tackle, and making sure our communities are safe and keeping kids safe. And so I'm looking forward to talking about all those ways and stuff shortly.
Thank you. We're really excited to have you here. And I think your introduction just speaks to how you're such a perfect fit for this group because, similar to your story, it's our experiences as mothers that intersect with the classroom and kind of led to this initiative. So you're in good company.
Great.
There are a few reasons why we wanted to talk about gun safety in this episode. One, in Florida, there are loosening legislation around, permits to carry and things like that. We just went through an election, and so now the Republican Party will have power in all three branches of government and tend to be less proactive or motivated to tighten legislation around gun safety. And we're going into the holiday season where kids are going to be spending more time at home in November and December as we bring in the new year, more time with friends, more time with family. And so we wanted to just talk about, as our kids are in different places, and even spending a little bit more time, by themselves, how can we make sure that they are safe as it relates to guns? So please tell us more about your work with Be Smart and Moms Demand Action.
Sure. To go into, I guess, the Be Smart program itself, Be Smart is a program from the Everytown for Gun Safety organization. Everytown was founded after the Sandy Hook tragedy, and that motivated a lot of parents to really take some action. Um, Underneath Everytown for Gun Safety is Students Demand Action, Moms Demand Action, and the Be Smart program. The Be Smart program is facilitated by Moms Demand Action in the community. So sometimes I wear this shirt and sometimes I wear a Be Smart shirt. With Be Smart, it's a program specifically geared towards talking to the parents about secure storage because it is our responsibility as parents and adults to keep our children safe. It's not their responsibility, to not touch a gun. It shouldn't be around and accessible. That's where we see the preventative nature in this. And so with Be Smart, we're aiming to not only educate parents, but also change the culture in talking about gun safety. We want parents to be comfortable asking about it if kids are going to other homes. We want parents to be comfortable talking to their own kids about it. And so, every conversation you have, you get more comfortable. And so we just encourage parents to start having those conversations. So with Be Smart itself, SMART is actually an acronym. It stands for secure, model, ask, recognize, and tell. And to break down those acronyms and the meanings for secure, we want everyone to secure their guns in their homes and vehicles. Specifically, we call secure storage an unlocked gun where the ammunition is secured separately from the firearm itself. We want to make sure that those two aspects are separate. So that way, it's another means where someone just couldn't pick it up. You would have to actually load the gun itself. We encourage people to use different means, whether it's biometric locks, different gun safes. There's cable gun locks that we offer at some of our tabling events for free. So that way we give them the tools to implement secure storage right away. If we talk to you, we want you to be able to take action. And so that's one of the main reasons for securing your vehicle or your firearms. And I did mention vehicles because we're really finding out with the numbers and research that a lot of firearms are being stolen from vehicles. It's unfortunate. It's an easy way for people to access them. And sometimes they are not locked up when they're in the glove compartment or in your console. So we also noticed that, especially locally, a lot of those firearms that are stolen are used for crimes. It was a crime that got them to obtain the gun itself, and usually then it gets into the circulation of the community and then is used for a crime in the future. So we do want to encourage, we say not only homes, but also vehicles. And then with M, model is modeling that responsible behavior. So as you lock your guns up at home and securely store them, your kids are seeing that behavior being modeled. They understand that this is part of gun ownership, is making sure that it's locked away responsibly. And then when the guns are around, you are around too as an adult. There should never be a gun accessible with a child around your home. So then when it comes to the A and asking, that is asking all about the presence of unsecured guns in other people's homes. Now that we've secured and modeled responsible behavior in our own home, we also want you to ask when it comes to play dates or overnights or just visitations with grandma. There's family members, there's friends, there's community volunteers and stuff that usually all, interact with your child. Sometimes your child's visiting them for different reasons, but either way, if they are going to a different home or location, we want you to get comfortable with asking about guns, just like dogs and animals, just like food allergies, just like swimming pools, all of those things, whether or not they're being transported in vehicles and things. We want you to kind of throw in that, do you happen to have, or really the best way to ask is to kind of assume that they own a gun and then ask if it's responsibly stored. Say, if you happen to have any firearms at home, are they securely stored? And usually parents will say yes. It's something that if they haven't thought about it, when you do that ask, they will. And so we encourage just to start keeping that as part of the conversation, like any other question that you ask about your child's safety. And then R is for recognize, and that's recognizing the risks of teen suicide. Unfortunately, when it comes to guns, it is an easy method for suicide attempts to become lethal. Uh, Unfortunately, kids who have access to the guns, especially when they're in mental episodes, have a higher rate of lethal suicide attempts versus if it wasn't with a gun as their means. And so we encourage that anybody who has guns at home, especially as the kids grow into the teenage stages, that you recognize if there is a mental episode to make sure you secure the guns or even remove them from your home during that time. If they're struggling and stuff, you just don't want them to have the means to carry out something that may be a fleeting kind of thought. And so we recognize the role that guns play in suicides. And of course, having that secure stored firearm and not having means for them to access it can make a big difference. And so finally, for the T, it's for tell, and that's telling your peers to be smart. So just like I'm talking to you with this conversation, anytime you talk to other parents or talk to teachers and educators, encourage them to kind of adopt that be smart message. It doesn't have to be the whole program and the whole lecture, but asking about guns, and then just making sure that things are secured around children in the presence of children. You start to kind of change that culture a little bit. And so we want to make sure that, of course, as a Be Smart program volunteer, I tell people all the time, but then I also want them to kind of carry that on and pass that on and just get comfortable with the conversation.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of really good information that I know we'll like digest, we'll break down. We will share the Be Smart infographics like on our social media and on this podcast so people can dive into it a little bit more. I was so eager to get into the conversation that I forgot about the stats that I wanted to share just about, firearms. And so just one thing that I wanted to mention is that firearms are the leading cause of death for children and teens in America. Like that is mind blowing to me. Like more than car accidents, more than cancer, more than poisoning, like it's firearms. So thank you for kind of breaking down why that might be the case.
Mhm. I think it's so crazy to be thinking as you were speaking, Laura, like when you mentioned the aid to ask, I don't think I've ever asked that if my kids are going to somebody else's house, like, hey, have you secured your firearm? Like it's so crazy, so indicative of the times, but such a crazy world to be living in right now. And I'm so glad that you broke down what that acronym was because honestly, I don't think like I know that this is the issue, is an issue, but I don't think I would have even thought about it in that context, honestly.
Yeah. So it's interesting, Laura, when you were talking about the secure piece. So a couple of things. I've never thought about securing the actual firearms separate from the ammo. Like, didn't even think about that. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like, it's not enough just to like lock it away, but make it even like harder, right? It's kind of like we have like these two-step processes for like logging into our computers. Like that is that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that totally made sense to me. And then I kind of just wanted to like affirm the car, like the firearms being stolen out of the cars. So in our neighborhood, my husband parks outside. And a few months ago, somebody had like opened up his car. Yes, he didn't lock it, like ridiculous. I know, but that's a whole nother thing. But luckily the firearm was not in the truck, but that's what people were looking for. Like, so they hit a couple of the houses on our street for the cars that were outside. And I had never thought about that either. And so like when the sheriff came to kind of like get the report and all that kind of stuff, they were like, oh yeah, they were definitely looking for firearms because after they steal it from you, then they go out and commit a crime. And if you don't report it lost, like if you haven't had it locked in, like you're now responsible for that as well. And so that's a whole nother piece of just thinking about making sure that we're securing our firearm, but also our vehicle. Because like this could have some huge impact if you don't and something happens there. So that was neat to hear. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing. I actually attended a luncheon for League of Women Voters recently, and Sheriff Mina recently worked with Scott Randolph, our tax collector, to make a PSA specifically talking about firearms being stolen in vehicles. Of all places where you get your tags and your stuff renewed, they're like, it makes sense for us to educate the public about this because it is a big problem.
So I have to admit that like I initially, when I heard the A acronym about ASK, I felt a little bit uncomfortable, like apprehensive about asking people about how they secure their guns. And I shouldn't, but it seems like a bit of an uncomfortable conversation. So Jania, as a gun owner, I just wonder, like, has anybody ever asked you all and what that has been like, what the conversation's been like? Yeah, nobody has ever asked us. Like, and I mean, we are in the community, like we've got kids that come over all the time, and nobody has ever asked us. Nor have I ever asked anybody either, because I think it's similar to, I know a lot of times we talk about the educational piece, right? Of like asking people, but it is kind of like, I don't know that I would ask somebody. And I think Laura made a really good point earlier that it is not our children's responsibility, but it's like the adult's responsibility. So I've had conversations with my children of like, hey, if you see a gun, like don't touch it, like don't play with it. It's not something to play with. All of those things, right? This is dangerous. This is what it could lead to. But never once have I put the responsibility on the adult, unless it was like me and my husband of like us putting our gun away, right? So I think that's just a really like valid point, is that it's not the child's responsibility, that it is the adults. And so we have to figure out how we ask that. Yeah, because we ask, like, we live in Florida, so we ask about pools. I think, I mean, I've asked about pools, like, hey, is like, does your pool have a screen on it? Or like, if I know you have a pool, then maybe I'm going with my children to your house, or making sure that they know how to like swim and those kind of things. So yeah, the gun piece, like, nobody's ever asked. I've never asked. I will now. They will probably ask me now too. So that's good.
I'm
I
with you,
mean,
Deshaun, about
children.
the whole idea of just like it feels kind of invasive when you're like asking people about, what kind of measures they have in place. But now hearing all of this information, knowing the people that I know, they are gun owners. I never think because, the people that, especially my daughter spend the most time with, they have preventive measures. So I never thought to ask because I know the measures that are set in place. However, just like Jania said, I don't never think to ask about anybody else's house that we might even be going to. So
Yeah,
So,
oh, sorry. With
no, no,
these
no. Go ahead.
with Be Smart, we kind of encourage you, if you're not that comfortable, especially kind of with a vocal conversation, sometimes text is an easy way where you're just able to kind of address some things very short and succinct. And so we're like, you can kind of bury it in that list of questions about food allergies and pools and things like that. And you just throw in, firearms or guns at home. And so um, just doing whatever means is comfortable for you, and kind of finding that. I know I personally I've had to ask some friends and stuff, and the answers have been kind of run the gamut, and some have surprised me with what they answered. And so it's it's just the more you do it, the more comfortable you are. And if I may ask, Jania, as a gun owner, like how would you feel if we asked you about it? Like, would you be kind of offended or a little, questionable, or think we're a little sus if we're asking about guns in your home if our children are supposed to be there?
Yeah, no, I don't think I would feel like questioned. I would be honestly surprised because nobody has ever done it. So now I'm like, oh, like, yes, it is like secure. And I was like, but now that I know that the ammo and the gun are supposed to be separate places, like, and it's not. So now I'm like, oh, now we have to like rethink this and let me get on my, so I can be smart. Like, now I'm embarrassed, but before I was not.
Okay, so I have a question because also as a gun owner, my children have zero clue that that is like something that I have. Is that like, are we supposed to like have these conversations with them? Like, w- how, what, where? And I think like, I feel like the uncomfortableness of even thinking about asking somebody else is I know it's rooted in my own, like, I don't want to put my business out there. But if an adult asked me about like going to the range or like having a gun, it's no problem. But I feel like I don't know if I would ever like have that conversation with my kid. So how do you navigate that? Is there age appropriateness in this
mhm.
conversation? Guns, yes, but me, mom, owning a gun?
There, yes, yes, yeah, I completely feel you with that one. It's there is age appropriateness to that conversation, yes. To kind of give you that. We encourage talking to the kids as part of that modeling responsible behavior. Of course, when they're little, it's very no touch. If you see one, tell. that kind of simple message. And then as they get older, you kind of want to check in with ways when you have those opportunities, whether it's you're watching something on TV and something happens. Maybe you can, say, hey, did you ever find a gun like that at your friend's house? Or lately, we've been getting emails from school regarding firearms and whether or not there's threats made to the school or firearms being brought into the schools. Sometimes that's a conversation starter. As they get older, unfortunately, this is more in the high school, age, but yeah, they're dealing with this stuff. If they've had a drill recently at school, that's another conversation starter. There's ways that you can do it where it doesn't seem so like lectury with the kids, where unfortunately it's going to come up more organically through the ways that we are here in America. And so take those moments, when they say, oh, we got locked and we had a call and we were in lockdown today or something. And maybe just, feel how they are and how they think about firearms and especially gun violence.
Yeah, I think speaking in that realm, it just is framed so differently in my brain to say, oh, mommy has a gun. Ah,
Well,
it just on if I'm being honest,
mhm.
it feels weird to me, and I'm like, I feel like I'm towing the line between if I'm introducing it, am I like planting some sort of seed? What if there's like some sort of like any like new fascination with it,
Like
and I
that
can
curiosity.
talk through it, but then like my oldest is 7, so I know that he's been in lockdown drills, and I know that he's seeing things on like TV or like hearing from his little fast friends. But, you know, so how can I don't know.
Well,
It's just such a delicate situation in my brain.
it is. And when you mention, if you ever do share with him that you do have one in the household, mention how it is locked up. And that
Hmm.
is, that is safe behavior. And that's why it's locked up, is so that he can't get a hold of it or his friends and unintentionally or accidentally have some accidents happen, or have anybody talk him into trying to access it too.
Hmm.
So you want to make sure, because like you said, if he's hearing it from his peers already, he's kind of exposed to responses at school with the lockdown drills and things. It's already in their brain and it's already vocabulary that they're learning. And it's unfortunate, but of course, as parents, you want them to hear the right messages from you first. And
Yeah.
so look at those awkward or uncomfortable times as kind of a way to kind of have a little conversation or a little something to you share, I do have a gun, but it's locked up. So here's the problem, but here's my solution, and here's what I'm doing to make sure you're still safe. And
Yeah.
kind of pair those together because yes, especially with the littler ones, it's tough for them. You don't want them to kind of think it's no big deal because it
Yeah.
is around a lot. And yes, having firearms around is a big deal, and it's adults. It's a tool for adults. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, you want to frame everything where, yes,
Yeah.
we're here to keep you safe.
Yeah, I will say like this conversation, I'm glad that we're having it because it's reframing my mind and maybe just hearing also um from others like how it may be. Jania, do you talk to your kids about your gun or having a gun in the house?
Yeah, so my oldest, we've had the conversation with him, and it really kind of sparked because I don't know if it was a drill or there was like another tragedy, but it was kind of like oh, you guys have a gun? Like you must be bad people. And we were like, whoa, 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 like that's not why we have a gun and then explaining like why we have a gun. Like this is a safety measure, but it's like adult, like some of the other
Right.
conversations we're gonna have too, right? Like that these are adult things. But I want you to have this understanding. With my youngest, we have not had that conversation, but we have had like the code red drill conversation. Because he's been in those and came home and went down the whole thing of like, oh, if there's a bad person in the school, then like we have to go under like all of these things. And it broke my whole heart, even though I'm
Yeah.
an educator and I've been through multiple fire, but I was just like, not my innocent 4 year old. But
Yeah.
I think it's also one of those things is like I want you to understand why I have it, what I'm doing with it, why we are doing this, and not that we are bad people. And not everybody that owns a gun is a bad person, right?
Right.
What the action is that happens with that gun. And so I think that's been something that's been really helpful of explaining to them. And then things like, oh, okay, well, I knew you weren't bad
Yeah.
people, but I just had this moment. But yeah, I think it is that piece. But I think it also helps like break some of the I don't know, shame or taboo that
Yeah,
goes
the
with,
tabooism. That's what I
yeah,
kept
yeah.
thinking
Because
about.
I think even if, I don't know, and this may be completely like left, but if my child was to go to somebody's house and saw a gun and then be like, ooh, I can't say anything because it's a bad thing and it's taboo and it's like, that like I haven't had this conversation with you, so then you won't say anything to me, and then something could happen, right? Compared to if we've already had this conversation and like like these are the only reasons why you should use a gun, but if you see one that's out, like don't touch it and make sure you tell somebody. I hope that he is more likely to tell me because like it's already been like neutralized that conversation and doesn't make anybody bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And I genuinely like generally think about it like think about things like that.
Yeah.
You know, like sex, but so why wouldn't I talk about guns?
Yeah. Yeah. It's literally the same. It's not literally the same, but it is the same as some of these other uncomfortable conversations we're gonna have, whether
Right.
it is about sex or race or any like it is
Yeah,
those things that we're like, ooh, cringe, but we got to talk about it because we, like Laura said, we want them to hear it from us first before they go out to their
absolutely.
friends. Or one of the things I was gonna ask about in that modeling was like our kids and like video games are seeing things on the TV, right? And so they're seeing how to use guns and like not such a great example. And so while we're modeling, like putting the gun away and making sure that it's locked up, like what are your thoughts or what are Be Smart's thoughts on modeling like proper usage of a gun?
Well, yes, Be Smart does encourage, because of that modeling behavior, not just locking it up, but also either using it and stuff. But again, it's kind of like the conversations. You want to make sure it's age appropriate. So the only thing that I remind, because we talk to a lot of parents at table events and stuff, and so a lot of them, I'll tell you this, out of all the conversations I've had with parents, no one ever thought that this was a bad idea to ask about them or to have the guns securely stored. I've never gotten any real pushback, for inquiring about stuff or encouraging safe storage and stuff for the firearms. Um, I would just keep in mind that as they grow, that our part, the recognize, is recognizing that the role in suicide, and when it comes to suicide, especially with youth, they use the means that are most comfortable with them. So there's a lot of parents that are very proud that they have shown their kids how to properly use a firearm and stuff, as they are growing older. But it's a fine line to walk, because you just want to make sure that they know how to use it and stuff if they are ever in need, but not having access to it will help them, yeah, not see it as a tool for the means that you do not want them to use it for. So the best thing is that they're only able to use it when you're around, at the range or at, different safe spaces. And then that's where that all that modeling happens. And so they understand that it's a tool for adults.
I think there's a couple things I really appreciate about this conversation. One is that I think that learning about the Be Smart program um has helped me focus more on gun safety And I appreciate that it's focused on safety and not necessarily imposing on people's right to own a gun, carry a gun, So I appreciate the safety nature. And I think it broadens the conversation, because I think my first mindset when I think about firearms are like on the street, right? And then I might think about school shootings. But this broadens it up even more to include those things, but just also about, the number of kids who unintentionally shoot themselves or who use that to commit suicide. So I just appreciate how it like broadens up the conversation in a way that makes it relevant to more people and it's focused on safety, not like don't have the gun, let's collect them all, but just how can we be safe? So what advice would you give to listeners who want to get involved in promoting gun safety in their local community?
Oh, wow. Well, first I'd welcome you to a meeting. We'll be looking at scheduling some local meetings for Mom Demand Action for the new year. So we have a Facebook group, Central Florida Moms Demand Action. We encourage you to look at our website or our app. And also Be Smart has their own events too. So sometimes when I'm tabling with Be Smart, I don't wear my red shirt. The red shirt with moms, they specifically go after some of the legislation and stuff. Where Be Smart, we want to ignore kind of that part of the conversation and focus solely on the adult's responsibility of safety. And so sometimes, depending on where I'm at, I've got to navigate certain conversations and in certain ways, but it's all under that umbrella. Kind of like you mentioned, you didn't realize this intersectionality of gun violence everywhere it is. It's more pervasive than I think people realize. And especially in certain communities more so than others. And and so because of that, there's different ways we communicate this message. And so we want everybody on board, whether it's just sharing stuff on social media, like you mentioned, the statistics that were eye-opening to you. Share that with other people. If you're not, kind of already involved with your children's schooling to the point where you're familiar with the different safety programs that they teach in your school, get to know about that. What are they telling the kids about firearms and stuff? I'm very lucky that my children go to a school that uses Sandy Hook Promise program. And so that's one of their teaching methods, which really with the kids, it's all about, keeping them safe and loved and in these happy environments and focused on good things to where they're not looking to turn to violence, or they know that violence isn't the answer and they learn other means for dealing with things. So learning about different programs in your school, either going to school board meetings too. I actually was after the lockdown drill that I was in with my kids. They were, I have twins and they were in first grade at the time, and they were actually in the same classroom because it was their first year in public school. And so after that, I really, had to take a step and look and say, why did I feel so nervous during this? Well, because it was my first one, for one thing. And then I realized because it's my first one, I didn't know what to do. And so I'm like, well, that means other volunteers may not know what to do if they didn't grow up in lockdown drills. So I went to a school board meeting and I was like, you know what? I want to take action. And I told them, please educate us addition approved background check volunteers on your safety protocols. And so now there's a video that's required when you get your background check that says, this is our, I'm like, because I just didn't know what to do in an emergency. And so I don't want to be kind of unprepared. I, at least as an adult and a parent, I want to be educated enough about their procedures. And so if you see something like that or experience something like that, and you're like, wait, there should be answers, or there should be, someone around, it's like, speak up and say something about it. It's it was really eye-opening for me how quickly the process was able to take place by the next school year. They had that on there. They now have pages on OCPS regarding firearm safety, and they send out a email every year about gun safety. So don't think that it's such a big thing that your actions won't make a difference, because they do. And so I want to encourage, any way that you can. If you see ways, even if it's just like I said, telling your peers and stuff about it, that's taking action and that's doing something. So yes, but if you want to take the next step and either become a volunteer or learn about the different ranges of, we have so many different caucuses and committees. We actually have a gun owners caucus within every town for gun safety. We have ones for veterans, we have ones for educators, and then of course, our LGBTQ groups and stuff. And so we want it to be a safe space for everybody who wants to see change in gun violence, because we know that this is a preventable thing.
It absolutely is. I think especially when we apply this be smart principle. So thank you for talking about be smart on be ready. Like we're on it. We're on it. And we'll definitely be sharing about these resources and look up some of the things that you mentioned and share about it within our network. So Janine, I'm gonna turn it over to you for the heart of a podcaster.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much, Laura, for sharing Be Smart and all of the ways that we can really make sure that we are safe. With the holidays coming up, yes, our children are going to be going to different places. We're going to be going to family members' houses. There's a lot that happens between November, December, and January. And I want us to kind of take a moment. We did share I think it was like last week, from the Black educators, a Nurture You November kind of like checklist. And so I want to throw the question out to my podcasters and you as well, Laura. When you think about nurturing yourself in November, what's something that you want to prioritize for your self-care? Or what is one that you've already done? Um, or what is something that would be challenging for you in self-care?
So I'm gonna go with sleep for 200.
Okay.
So the thing on here that I did do is go to bed by 9 p.m. That's one of the
Mm,
things on here. And literally, y'all, one night I got like 12 hours of sleep. I went to bed at like 7 something and did not wake up until that time the next morning. And I was so excited about it. It felt wonderful. But I think like the timing of the kids' vacations overlaps with like my vacation. So like I need like a break without them being out of
mhm,
school. So I think one of the things I'm thinking about now that you asked the question about self-care, and I think I sent it in our group chat. It's like how to take 11 days and make it into like 38 days of
uh-huh.
like vacation. Is how can I group up some days in November and in December so that I can get a little bit of me time? Because also like I'm an introvert, so love being around family, but 3 months of family and I'm like, oh my God, where can I get a corner and a book? So not just from the kids, from people in general, and all the holiday parties and all that stuff can be a bit much. So I think that's what I'm going to work on, is figuring out when I can just take some days and do my own thing.
Yeah. So to follow that, mine was along the same lines. I like the one about like taking time to meditate.
Mm,
I feel like I have to like fill all the moments, because if I'm not doing something, I could be doing something else and I don't want to waste the time. But then, especially as of late, as work ramped up, I feel like I am going all the time, and then I'm tired, and then comes the crash. So I want to, and I know it said like 5 to 10 minutes, but I'm looking for like a solid 30 minutes just for myself. Um, I don't want to hear from the kids. I don't want to hear from the husband. I don't want to hear from anybody. I just want to decompress the day. And I want to do it at least 2 to 3 times a week. Uh, yeah, yeah, that's really my goal, because I find myself needing and craving more time for myself. because I get none ever, 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 ever.
I think for me is just being kind to myself by saying no and being okay with it, because that has been hard to just say no, because it is a complete sentence. It is a complete thought, and it is what it is.
That's a good one. I say no all the time, but I feel like I say no to the wrong things. It's just like, okay, okay, yeah.
I also think so one of them twice I see sleep in on here. And so I'm like, that's not really an option for me. But I actually appreciate getting up when no one else is up. Like that's more like self-care for me than to sleep in. So I think like I was proud of myself for seeing the list and not feeling like, oh, I have to do everything exactly as it's written, but just get the gist of it, that the point is to nurture myself. And if something doesn't work for me, replace it with something else that does.
Yeah, that's a good point because I saw that one and I was like, oh, I wish I could sleep in. What a distant dream.
Well, for me, I do like the idea. Now, Deshaun, earlier you mentioned pies. I also see making a pot of soup is on here, and I plan on doing that with my daughter this year for Christmas. And it was a tradition for me and my husband when before the girls were around, making some broccoli cheddar soup around Christmas Eve. So I think I'm gonna pull her into the kitchen and start sharing that tradition with her.
I love that because anything that said make food, I was like, mm-mm. So like I'm happy for you because I was like, you want me to bake a pie? I've never baked a pie in my whole life. I don't want to do that. So no, that's good. And I think most of them I was like, yeah, we can do this. Like I can stretch, I can take a nature walk, I can get 5 compliments in a day. Like that would be great. A relaxing bubble bath. That one I was like, I don't know how I feel about that one. I don't know if that's for me. I don't know. There's just something, there's like, I don't know. But I did give Austin a bubble bath the other day. So I'm gonna say that I'm gonna check that one off for me. Cause then he was like contained for a while. He got out and was like, my skin's so moisturized. And I was like, I'll check that one off that I did it. But it's so important for us to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. I think everybody say that it's really hard to do one or another because there are so many things that we're doing and that we're saying yes to, and so many people that rely on us, which is beautiful because I know that you all are all amazing moms and spouses, and that's dope. But you can only be as good as you are to yourself. So make sure that you all are nurturing yourselves, make sure that you're hydrating yourselves, make sure that you're being smart to yourself. You like that? You like that? Oh, okay,
See
good.
what you did there.
So that we can have a good holiday season.
I love it. I've enjoyed this episode so much. So
Yeah.
thank you, Laura, as always. My podcast sisters. I want to say this. I actually was talking to somebody and she was telling me about some opportunities. She was like, yeah, it's for you and your podcast sisters. And I was like, oh, that's cute. I like that. So to my fellow podcasters and Laura, thank you. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like it, subscribe, share, and be smart and be safe. Bye. Thanks.
Bye, y'all.